Que bueno! Hola! This week I had Sam from Homespun Audio on the show. We talked about recording gear, recording philosophies, aliens, and some other things. He gets to work with all kinds of songwriters, and it was a wonderful conversation. Enjoy! I don't care that you don't care. He was like, so if you do become president, will you let us know if there is alien information? And he was like, Joe, I will let you know. My wife will make me let you know.
I did see a meme online recently where it said something like, I wonder how long after a person is elected president, like how long that awkward period is where they're trying to figure out when the right time is to ask about aliens.
Yeah.
Like no one's brought it up yet, but they're like,
Right.
I'm going to get told about this at some point.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And the whole, it's very relevant too with the whole,
The Area
issue.
51 thing.
Exactly.
My
That
goodness.
and also, that Bob Lazar, I don't know if you've heard it. If you're interested in aliens, you should watch that. There's this guy named Bob Lazar. He didn't work at Area 51. He worked at one of the other ones, like Area 50, Area 49. I don't know. One
of the more deep track areas.
I guess so, yeah. And basically he's released this. He's been, since apparently for a long time, for many years, he wasn't working there, and he released information, basically talked about the things he saw. And he's never once said, he's never made like outrageous claims like I saw aliens or anything. He's just like, I did see some pretty, I saw some highly advanced technology that wasn't explained, basically. Okay. And so like he talks about these, basically these crafts that can hover in these ways that he'd never seen before. So basically like, he was seeing drone technology like in the 80s, which
way before it was commonplace, yeah.
And also this, some of the stuff he was saying, like no one would tell him or explain where it was from or anything. It was like, is this from Earth or is this, like what, but apparently you're not supposed to. You can imagine, like, if you work in a place like that, you probably shouldn't ask a whole lot of questions. You just act like you're a professional and, you just keep going. But he's just released a documentary. If you just search Bob Lazar, I think it's Lazaar, then you'll find it. And he talks all about a lot about the information that he attained during that time. It's very interesting. And he doesn't, from my experience, I didn't think he sounded crazy at all. Like he gets this rap that he's claiming that all this stuff exists, but he sounded like a very well put together person that's just like, these are the things I saw. I'm not saying that, I'm not making any claims necessarily. Right. I'm just telling you what I experienced.
Yeah.
So anyways, so do you believe aliens exist?
I do, yeah. Okay. Well, and here's what I was going to say when I say I have like opinions about aliens. The rant I'll always go on when this topic comes up is I feel like people, because of movies and, science fiction and things like that, people always assume that, when we think of alien life or life outside of Earth, people immediately jump to, humanoid, like green looking things things with like antennae or or these like militant things with like spacecraft and like I mean, I think I have absolutely no trouble believing in alien life, like life on other planets. I mean, I think the reality is most of the life on other planets probably actually doesn't look like what we would think of when we think of life forms on Earth. Exactly. Honestly, I heard someone say, I heard a scientist say one time, he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a ton of alien life in the universe, and I think most people on Earth would be disappointed to realize it's mostly like bacteria.
Sure.
It's mostly like microorganisms or, organisms that don't resemble anything on Earth because the gravity and the environment on their planet is so different that like, a human or an animal on Earth wouldn't be able to survive in that environment. So all that to say, I do believe in aliens. I just believe they're probably a lot more boring than people on Earth think of when they think of aliens. Yeah. And if we actually met them, we would be disappointed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's just the human need for belief and kind of creation of something. And that's kind of it makes it a little more fun though have those kind of goofy movies like.
Oh yeah. Oh, and I'm not in any way saying this as a knock against like sci-fi movies. I love sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when I always feel the need to say when I believe in aliens, I'm a big believer in boring aliens.
Yeah. I like that statement a lot. I'm a big believer in boring aliens.
I'm going to put that on my business card.
Yeah, that is good. That is good. Or maybe that should be your album title, your next album title.
Ooh.
I'm a big believer in boring aliens.
Actually, Boring Aliens would be a good band name, too.
It is pretty good.
Okay.
That is pretty good. Yeah.
Putting that out there, I don't need this because I'm in a band already, so anyone listening, if you want a band name, you can have that one, Boring Aliens.
What kind of music?
Also, just look what you started.
Yeah. What kind of music? what kind of music would Boring Aliens be?
Boring Aliens. I mean, I feel like it'd be cliche to say like electronica, weird ambient stuff because that's what people think of when they think of aliens.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like just to play against type, Boring Aliens should be like, I don't know, like a honky tonk like bluegrass type band.
Okay.
Like just to kind of fuck with people's expectations.
Yeah. What if that takes me down a rabbit hole a little bit? What if like what has never exactly been done? It kind of rockabilly is like a little bit. I was thinking like there's never really been honky tonk and punk, but then I was like, well, that's kind of rockabilly.
Yeah,
kind of. But maybe even a little more like honky punk or something. So it's like, so that could be an interesting, because especially like with the dichotomy of being like saying we're boring, but actually being really intense music.
Yeah.
That could be really interesting. I could be into that. I'm a big fan of contrast. So like if you like, especially because I don't ever like to, when someone tells me something, it's not like if you say this is boring, then I usually don't believe it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm actually interested now. I want to see, is that actually boring or is that actually going to be something that wakes me up and is in my face?
Well, and I mean, a lot of people say like, sort of the only consistent definition of punk music is just music that like plays against type and doesn't conform to standards. And I feel like there would be nothing more punk than an alien showing up on Earth and just being a bacteria that doesn't do anything.
Yes, I love that. It's so good. This is whenever we have. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but maybe it's up to us to be boring aliens. But it might be like years down the road when we have a little more time. We'll have to put this on the back burner because I like this a lot. I like that idea a lot. Okay, so homespun audio.
Yes.
That is something you started. When did you start that?
I think I officially launched it. Like I officially came up with the name Homespun Audio. I think it was either early fall or very late summer last year. So it's actually almost been about a year since I kind of formally launched it. But yeah, it's kind of it's sort of been an evolving process because basically I've been trying to get into home recording, home music production since it was actually Christmas of 2016.
Okay.
Was when it was actually, I mean, the genesis of it is kind of funny. It was literally my family always asks, my siblings and I to send out Christmas lists, like wish lists and things like that, and I'm always bad at both shopping for people and asking people to shop for me. And so my wife Liz was like, "Oh, you should, like I know you want to put out another album at some point. Like you should ask for some recording equipment." And at the time I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about recording. Like I wouldn't even know what to ask for. And she's like, "Well, you have Google. Like you can figure that out." And so I literally just started Googling from scratch. Like, what do you need to record on a laptop?
Sure.
I didn't know what an audio interface was. I didn't know what the difference between like an XLR and a USB cable was. And so. But so I kind of read a couple tutorials and, figured out on a basic level that it was, I think I'd always been intimidated to get into recording and music production because it sort of seemed like an alchemic science that was, did I pronounce that right? Alchemic?
No, you're right.
Okay. Yeah, like this, it sort of seemed like this, this mysterious, like mystical art form that was like way over my head, and
totally.
that I would have needed to go like meditate in the mountains for years to kind of master. And
and maybe, and it is an instrument. Like recording is an instrument, and that's I never got that perspective until I think Wayne from the Flaming Lips said that. He's like,
Yeah.
recording is actually an instrument, and I was
yeah.
wow, I never took that perspective.
That's why the people always refer to George Martin as the fifth Beatle.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Because
yeah,
the way he produced them and the way he recorded them was every bit as much an instrument as Paul McCartney's bass playing or Ringo's drumming.
You're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I started to read about it and actually kind of had the revelation of, I do feel like on a basic level I'm actually able to understand this, and I also found it really interesting. And so from then I just bought a couple things. I bought just a 2-channel interface, and one, I think it was a Rode NT1 was my first kind of formal recording microphone. And just like, I got Pro Tools as well, and so I just started playing around with those, with a really basic setup. Learning on a really basic level how to gain stage, how to do basic mixing in the computer, and then. And the funny thing is, my goal from the beginning was always just, I want to learn how to record and produce music on a basic level so that I can record my own music, and so I don't need to like pay someone else or rely on someone else to do it.
Yeah.
I never had the intention of producing music for other people.
Oh, okay.
But so how that happened, and actually, Jess, who for anyone listening was your last guest, she was actually one of the first people I collaborated with in this sense. Was I started going to friends of mine who I knew were singer-songwriters and asking them if they would essentially let me practice on them. Basically telling them, hey, if you'd like a free, free recording of questionable quality of your own music, I'm looking to just kind of hone the skill, and so could I come over, set some stuff up in your living room and do that?
Right.
And so she's one of the either the first or second person I did that with. I came over to her house and just did an acoustic track that she had written.
Yeah.
And I did that with a bunch of people over the next about year, and
this is 2017, right?
2017, yeah. Well, what was cool about that, and what was kind of transformative about that, was I really slowly realized that with I do like recording my own music, but I think I realized that I actually found it more fun and more fulfilling to produce music with and for other people. To kind of, to actually for the most part be taking off the performer hat and just be kind of engineering and producing and, facilitating other people's work. And so I guess it was a little while after that I realized, this is actually what I enjoy doing more than just recording in a basement by myself, is I like producing for other people. And then it was a bit of time after that and a bit of a journey after that to get to the point where I felt confident enough to actually offer that as a service. Because again, I'd always been doing it for people under the guise of, I'm learning and I want to practice. And, it's kind of a scary jump to go from that to advertising yourself as, this is a professional level skill that I'm offering to you and that I'm asking you to pay me money for. I tend to not be particularly confident or assertive about things like that. Like I hate writing cover letters. My cover letters always basically read as like a passive aggressive list of reasons why I'm not qualified for the job. It's like I'd really love this job. I know I don't have much experience. I know I've never worked in an office like this, and like trust me, I always come in late, but you should still. And so I'm not good at. I'm doing a great job of selling myself right now, I know, but
well, I would hire you.
Exactly, yeah. At least I'm honest. But
exactly. Well, I mean, I think that's expected for a musician to not be on time. I don't expect any musicians to be on time. When they are, that's when I actually am a little more concerned. Like,
I mean, the funny thing is, I just said that off the top of my head as an example. Being punctual is actually one thing I'm fairly good at.
Well, you were very punctual today. So,
to other people's chagrin, because I often get on other people for like being late or for taking too long. Anyway, tangent. But I was gonna say, so it took me a little while after that, and like a lot more practice and a lot more, just obsessive, watching of YouTube tutorials, reading books, I'll literally, this is how nerdy I am. I'll literally walk around the house like listening to interviews with audio engineers while I'm like cleaning, while I'm doing the dishes or things like that. So just kind of absorbing as much information as I possibly could.
What do you listen to in particular?
I mean, just stuff all over YouTube. There's I think it was Sound on Sound magazine. I think they would do the series called Mixed with the Masters, where it was like an in-person event, but then they'd also do a Q&A on YouTube where people could submit questions. so a number of producers I find interesting have done those where they'll
totally.
just answer, really kind of geeky questions
Yeah.
about, like what mic configuration do you use on drums, or
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what's your recommendation for recording in this type of space,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Yeah.
And yeah, or other than that, just like sometimes, workshops
Mm-hmm.
or, studio tours, kind
Sure.
of gear demo. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with gear demos.
Okay.
If anyone does like a keyboard rig breakdown, I'll watch it like 20 times.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Um,
Are you interested in Rick Rubin did he doesn't have a podcast, but he was interviewed on one. I can't think of the guy's name right now. He's an author. Anyways, he talked that was one of the best and most fascinating podcasts I'd ever listened to. He talked about recording Tom Petty, and that whole and I don't know if probably everyone doesn't know this, but Tom Petty actually has like a whole nother album worth of material that hasn't been released because apparently his he's in like a dispute. Or sorry, he's not in a dispute. The publisher and Rick Rubin and his daughter are all in a dispute
Yikes.
about releasing it, and apparently,
I hadn't heard about that actually.
apparently from what I remember, the daughter does not want it released. I don't really understand why. But anyways, let me get to the point here. So
Yeah.
Rick Rubin was talking about working with him and how inspired those songs were. And then they also talked about other producers and how, there's some producers who will literally, when they record drums, will only record one thing at a time. So if it's kick drum, just doing the kick drum. If it's snare, just recording the snare.
They'll have the performer just go through the track and play.
Yes. That is incredibly meticulous and time consuming, but I could also see how that could produce really good results because everything is just right there lined up and perfect. And you don't have to get like a perfect performance really. Right. Like everything should, but it also kind of takes away from the performance. But anyways, that's somewhat of a side note, but I just, that was one that I really, got excited about, and I'm just a big fan. Like Rick Rubin, I think is an incredible producer. I'm a big fan.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love all of the Johnny Cash American Recordings albums. Like that's kind of my main exposure to Rick Rubin. But I'm obsessed with those. I've listened to them over and over again. And I love Johnny Cash is one of the people I've listened to interviews about where he'll talk about the process behind that album.
Oh,
and
cool.
actually that's that's actually kind of a a good segue. I can get back into
Oh sure.
One of the we were talking about homespun audio earlier, which is my my recording and mixing business. One of the kind of mission statements I had with that is that I've always liked the idea of recording music outside of studios.
Okay.
Like even when I had the option of going into a studio, I think there's something really cool about just producing art in unusual spaces.
Sure,
And I have a couple of friends who are filmmakers, and they've said the same thing about the difference between filming on a soundstage versus on an actual set. Just like there's kind of a different energy, and it's often kind of more comfortable and more organic for the person. It feels more natural for them.
Sure. Yeah.
And so one of the reasons I think I felt inspired to actually formally start a business instead of just having this be kind of a hobby that I would do ad hoc for people is that I realized, through even just the few friends of mine I'd recorded with that that this was also an arrangement that worked for a lot of other people.
Sure.
That there were, there were things about studio recording that were sometimes just intimidating or inaccessible to people. I mean, there's obviously the the financial aspect, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, the cost of a studio, but also, I've recorded in formal studios a couple times, and even as someone who's like a little more comfortable with it now, like it can just be kind of intimidating walking into walking into a dedicated studio, and there, obviously you're surrounded by kind of really expensive equipment. You're in this very, sometimes fancy looking room and things like that, and especially if you're new to recording and new to performing, I guess it can just kind of be hard to get comfortable and feel like organic in an environment like that.
And the time's ticking too.
Exactly.
Like you're paying for time, so that's it's like sometimes, maybe not all the time. You can kind of get into a state, a really nice workflow in the studio, but also there is kind of like those horrible tests we have to take as high schoolers to get into college, like the SAT or ACT. they're timed, right? The GRE is timed too.
Yep.
So like it feels there's a bit of that to me. Like it's almost like you see the clock as soon as you walk in and you're like, oh God, I gotta get these gotta get this guitar down. It's gotta be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but I only have 2 hours to do that or whatever. Like, because then you got to move on to the next thing and do vocals and blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and I do just want to be clear. Like, I'm not intending this as like a knock against recording
Oh,
studios.
no,
Because again, I've
yeah.
recorded in a bunch of them.
Right.
I think you know, under the right circumstances, one, they're obviously amazing places.
Right.
You know, there are chances to do things there that you can't do elsewhere, and so it's
Very
really
true.
great.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I think just what I what I liked about the idea of offering a mobile recording service, which is what Homespun Audio is, because I don't I do a lot of recording at my house, but I don't have a dedicated recording space. You know, my wife and I rent the place that we live in, so it's not like I can tear down walls or set up a soundproof kind of chamber. I'm sort of just limited to what I have. But so it's an entirely mobile setup. I can record in my basement. I've also recorded in people's houses. Again, a number of the recordings I've done with Jess, we just did in her living room.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I liked the idea of offering that as a service is that it is just that it's an alternative for people for whom the studio model of recording doesn't work or isn't comfortable.
Right.
And I especially realized working with a lot of the the friends that I've recorded with and things like that. A lot of them were people who had never recorded before. And had never recorded before for some of the reasons I wanted to address, which was that they were like, I'm not a professional. I'm just an amateur songwriter. It seems like too big of a step to book studio time, go into a studio.
Sense,
And so, I like the idea of just being able to offer a, hopefully a professional caliber recording experience and give them a product that's professional caliber, but in a setting and with a workflow that feels more comfortable for someone who's new to it. And so And so partially for that reason, we were talking about Rick Rubin. Like, I love hearing behind the scenes stories of albums that were recorded in unusual places. Like, I think at least a couple of the American recordings tracks were just recorded in like Johnny Cash's living room.
Oh,
and I've seen
nice.
behind the scenes footage
cool.
of, he literally just kind of set up a condenser mic in front of him, and Johnny Cash is sitting on the couch with his guitar, like playing and singing, and that's the track that ended up on the album.
Oh, that's awesome.
And like stuff like that, I'm just obsessed with.
Oh, totally. There's I just found out. Are you familiar with Feist?
Only a little bit.
Okay. Maybe I'll introduce you to this afterwards, but there's a song I love. It's called I'm gonna get this wrong. It's called The Reminder, I believe. The album. It's a perfect album in my opinion from start to finish.
Okay.
She's got an incredible voice, but there's a song that she kind of just I don't know the story as far as what mic they used, but it's clear that she's outside because it's pretty noisy. You hear a lot of wind blowing, you hear birds chirping and stuff. But oh my God, the performance! The performance is perfect.
Oh yeah,
and they clearly kept it because the performance was so perfect. They were just like, I don't think we can recreate that in the studio, and that happens all the time. It also makes me wonder and think, because I know Elvis also recorded in his living room. So I wonder if Johnny Cash was kind of like, oh, Elvis did, because like they grew those two guys. Elvis and Johnny Cash both recorded at Sun Records in the 50s, right? If you ever get a chance to go to Memphis, you should check out Sun Records. That room, just if I'm being blunt, it looks kind of shitty. Like the walls are just decrepit but it sounds incredible in there. And they did exactly what you're saying. I mean, of course, in the 50s, that's all they could do. It's like one mic recording. And you had to nail it, but they play some of the early stuff in there, and I got super emotional. And I was like, I got to get out of here. This is, there's just something about those, some of those moments and performances. And that's so maybe we could kind of segue into that. Like, how do you, as the engineer, and I mean, I guess you're somewhat playing two roles. Like you're kind of producing and engineering, right? So how do you determine performance? Like what's kind of do you like to do multiple takes? Do you like to get performances? Do you like to do overdubs? Like what's kind of your choice when it comes to recording?
Sure. I mean, it depends a little on the performer. And again, I've, the people I've worked with thus far mostly people I know or people who have seen perform, so that gives you a bit of an edge going in, is that I sometimes have a bit of a sense of how that person works.
That
But
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, typically I will almost always have someone do multiple takes for a couple reasons. One, it's always good to have multiple options for editing. And one thing I'll tell them is this is, one of the occupational hazards of recording outside a studio is one time I was recording with someone who, they did a vocal take that was really, really fantastic. Literally, I could have just used that entire take in one swoop and it would have sounded great.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that was awesome. Could we maybe do like one or two more passes? And they were kind of like, well, I thought you just said that one was good. Why do we need to do one or two more passes? And I was like, well, because I was listening on headphones and like a truck drove by right in the middle. And so I'm definitely going to need to edit like part of it. So that's, that's part of the reason I like to have options for mixing is just there are things that you don't necessarily catch during recording. Or like I have a dog at home. It's not uncommon that the dog will like whine in the back of a take or something. Which again, those are things that the same things that kind of give the recording process a little more like character can also be technological obstacles, but but yeah, so I like to do multiple takes also because it again, a lot of the people I record with are people who aren't necessarily seasoned studio musicians or people who have spent a lot of time in the studio. And even just doing multiple takes is a good way for people to warm up and get comfortable.
Very
I
true.
found it's almost always true that someone, especially someone who's newer to recording, the first take, maybe, they'll be a little more tense, maybe a little more nervous. Right. Usually by take 3 or 4, they're audibly a lot more comfortable. They're kind of, maybe like taking more risks with the performance, kind of getting more lost in it. And so I like to give people a chance to open up like that.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, in terms of the producer role, and this is one thing I've heard a lot of people talk about, is there's a lot of disagreement about what the definition of a producer is. Sure. And I mean, it seems like the most common definition is that the producer is kind of the person who bridges the artistic and technical considerations of the recording process. So they're, making sure it's executed on a technical level properly, but they're also responsible for a lot of the artistic decisions. Like in the most controlling senses, a producer will be the one who has final say on like, this was the right take, or like, that guitar solo was good. Totally. This is the amp you should use. And so I think, to that end, I sort of gauge it based on the person I'm working with. Because sometimes I have recorded with a couple of people who, have spent a lot of time in the studio and, are very kind of confident performers, singer-songwriters. Yeah. And you can kind of tell early in a session when someone comes in and they're very adamant about, I have this acoustic guitar that I want to use and like I really want, to have the mic pointing this way and like, I really need the guitar track to sound like this. And you can tell pretty quickly. Yeah, you can tell pretty quickly when someone has a very clear vision and they even maybe have some, logistical preferences. And if that's the case, I'll almost always try to respect and accommodate those. I'm not going to push back and be like, whoa, you're the singer, I'm the producer, stay in your lane.
Right. Which ironically, when you said that, that's immediately how I felt, though. Yeah. Because it's kind of I do, there's a medium there, right? Right. Because that's kind of the thing. Because if you are hiring someone, and I don't want to get on too much of a tangent on that, but I've also had some disagreements with also when you when you give a song to someone to mix it, right? Yep. Like my personal view on mixing. Oh yeah, that's distracting.
Sorry, I'm getting for anyone listening, I'm getting like mesmerized by the screensaver. Okay, there we go. It's better. I can focus now.
Yeah. I'm a complete visual person.
I'm clearly a good producer because I have a fantastic attention span.
Yeah. But my personal view with mixing is that you give it to the mixer and they like you can give a little bit of direction, but I guess if I'm hiring someone to mix something, I'm just trusting them with it. Like, because if I want something a certain way, and this is something it's not something like I knew immediately. It's something I've learned over time. But if I want something a certain way, I'm gonna do it that way. But if I hire you to mix it or whoever to mix it, I actually want them. I want Sam's mix. Like I don't want my mix. I'm not gonna tell you that I want my mix on your thing. That's just my personal take. Of course, like anyone can have a different view, but that's kind of, so I guess that's why you said you don't push back against that, which I do think is the right call, but I immediately felt that way because it's kind of like, well, hang on, you're hiring this person and then you're kind of dictating what they're doing in a way.
Right. Well, I think one of the most kind of profound things I've heard about record production. This was kind of a humbling thing to say. So I mentioned that I listen to interviews a lot. One producer who I've listened to a ton of interviews and content with is Steve Albini. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's probably most famous for producing In Utero by Nirvana, but he's kind of famous for being, an independent record producer. He mostly works with unknown bands, and he has a lot of like specific recording philosophies. But a quote he said in an interview that I loved is he said a lot of people, and I don't necessarily agree with this taken to its fullest conclusion, but he said, a lot of people think of engineering and producing music as being like a creative job, and he's like, I don't think of it as a creative job. I think of what I do as being in a service industry. Like he's like in that, the same way that someone who works at a restaurant is in a service industry because they're people, when they're going out to eat, they need someone to like prepare food and bring it to them. He's like, in the same way, musicians who don't have access to recording equipment or don't have the knowledge need people to help them record and preserve their music. And so, he's like, I see my job as, I'm working for them. Like, I'm not making my own grand artistic statement. I'm doing a job for them, and I'm doing the job they're hiring me to do. And again, I don't, there are implications to that people can kind of take to one extreme or another. But I think I like the general idea, which is that, which is that, like, when I'm recording music for someone, the ultimate goal is to end up with a recording that they're happy with and that they think represents them. And to some extent, if we're in the middle of a session and I feel like I have a good handle on what they're trying to do and I genuinely think I have a better idea about how to approach it than them, I will, I'm never going to like put my foot down and kind of assert authority in an obnoxious sense, but I usually will maybe push back a little bit and say, I've done songs like this before. I really think it would sound cool if we did X. But at the end of the day, if I can tell that someone knows what result they want and also has some experience in how to get it, like I want to be open to following that, and I don't ever want to let ego or anything get in the way.
It's best to not let ego get in the way, and that's one of my big problems.
I mean, it's a problem with. I don't think I've ever met a musician who didn't have an ego in some sense or another.
You kind of need to,
exactly,
but it needs to be kept in check too,
right? And the flip side to that of having artists, the flip side of having artists who are very very confident and have a lot of ideas in terms of their approaches. I've also recorded with some people who maybe because they're not as experienced with recording or they're newer to it. They kind of actively want to defer all decisions to the person they're producing. Like sometimes, I'll play back, the take someone just did, and I'll be like, "Did you think this was a good take? Do you think this is a usable take?" And they'll just be like, "I want you to decide that." Like they're like, "No," because they're like, I can't even listen to it objectively anymore. I don't know what it's going to sound like from a mixing standpoint.
I see that. You can lose perspective as the artist.
Pretty quickly. So that's the kind of thing where I guess. If the question is like, to what extent do I play a producer role? It's kind of to the extent that the person wants me to. Like if someone comes to me and wants me to record a song for them, and they tell me, I literally want you to make all the decisions. Like the only thing I want to do, here today is stand in front of the microphone and sing the song the way I normally do. If someone asks me to do that, then I'll do that. I'll be as creative as I can, and I'll try to make decisions that I think will suit the song. If someone were to come to me and say, I know exactly how I want everything set up, how I want this to sound, I literally just need someone who owns microphones and can like click the spacebar in Pro Tools, then, I mean, I might have to check my ego at the door a tiny bit, but like I'm happy to do that too.
Okay. Man, that's awesome. I think that's fantastic that, and I do think, I'll have to look into Steve Albini a little bit more because my perspective on him was totally wrong in that case because I did think of him as a creative because In Utero is like arguably one of the most creative Nirvana albums.
I agree. I think it's personally my favorite album of theirs, and I'm a big Nirvana fan. I love pretty much everything they've done. But if I had to pick one, I think that's my favorite one. I mean, I think what I think is fascinating about him is what he would say is he would say, to the extent that that album sounds good and that it's creative, he said, you know, any creative decisions were made by the band.
Oh, really?
Or at least, you know, in his telling of it, that's what happened. Like, he was like, you know, if there's a really good take that wound up on the album, it's because the band listened to it and they were like, that's a good take, let's go with that. Or, you know, if there's a guitar sound that sounds good, it's that, you know, that's the way they set up the amp, and I just, you know, I figured out how to mic it so that it sounded, you know, accurate. But I think the way he talks about it, and again, you know, this may be just the way he's chosen to frame it, and it's not 100% accurate, but you know, the way he talks about it is that he doesn't consider his job a particularly creative one. He considers it like a technical and logistical job. And you know, I think that's kind of a tricky line, because I will say I disagree with a black and white statement like that producing isn't creative. I do think it's a creative job, but I also think
totally do.
But I do also think there's still a lot of room to yield creativity to the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. Yeah.
And part of that is, and like, this is a humbling thing to remember, is that, you know, if I produce a track for an artist and it goes up online, except for a very small handful of producers who themselves are like household names, the people listening to the recording, you know, any like awesomeness of the recording or any excellence of the recording is going to be attributed to the artist. And in fairness, like, I do think that's the way it should be. You know, you know, if I record just like, I should also mention, most of the work I do is singer-songwriter type recordings. That's kind of what I focus on, just because that's what my background is, and I feel comfortable doing that. But so if I produce a recording of someone where it's just, you know, an acoustic guitar and someone's vocal, and I do my best to do a good recording of that, you know, I want to record it such that when people listen to it, they're just, you know, they're just thinking about how awesome the song is and how great the artist sounds. You know, obviously, I mean, you know, I won't pretend to be completely egoless. Like, I'd like it if people think I did a good job. And, you know, you know, there's the selfish part of me that, you know, wants some of it attributed to me. But I do recognize that at the end of the day, you know, if you produce an album and that album survives for 40 years and people are still listening to it 40 years from now, they're going to be thinking about the artist when they listen to it.
Very true.
Not
Very true.
the engineer, and not even the studio in most cases. And I think that's totally okay.
Yeah. Well, and it also proves that you did your job really well.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yeah.
Like, it might prove that you did your job really even more if that is the case. Like, if they forget about all the things that went into it, and they just focus on the song and how good the song is.
Yeah.
You know, because that's
I've heard film directors say the same thing, that like I think I've heard from at least one film director who said, like, the best compliment they can get on a movie, and this only applies to some kind of films, but like the best compliment they can get on a movie is like, I wasn't thinking about the direction at all while I was watching it.
Yeah, right.
Because they were like, you know, I wanted to direct a movie that just pulls you in and makes you forget you're watching a movie. So they're like, if you're not thinking about me once during the entire film, that's actually flattering to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of weird if you do. That's that was one thing, because I actually went to film school, and that was one thing that was kind of difficult, is to not necessarily focus on the story, like focus on all the other aspects, you know, like the shots and you know, the angles and whatnot. But you know, also with music, it's also being kind of playing having all those hats, like, and I'm talking about myself, like I have produced some tracks and other artists, and so having those things, sometimes I do find it hard to like, sometimes I will put on that hat when I listen to other stuff, you know, and it's usually,
I mean, I've started doing that too.
It's usually best not to, but I do see how that could be a very high compliment.
Yeah.
So it started at technically it started at the end of 2006, or did you actually launch it in 2017?
I think I didn't actually launch it until late 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
you
late
just okay, I see.
So late 2018, I think it was end of summer, early fall. I could go check my Facebook page to figure out the exact date, but
sure.
Yeah, that was when I decided, you know, I had already at that point, even before I formally gave it a name and, you know, identified it as a business, I had already kind of been, contracted formally to do a couple things. Like, one of the most fun and meaningful jobs I got to do was, a guy who I went to church with, he was getting married, and he and his wife, which I think this is awesome, by the way, they're both into video games. Okay. And so they really, I think I told you about this. Yeah.
Yeah. You played it for the songwriters night, and I thought it was great. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I can't remember what was it I said. I gave you like a high compliment. is it Nigel Godrich? Isn't he the
Yeah,
guy?
he's the guy who works with Radiohead.
Yeah.
He's
also
a million
one
other
of my
people,
favorite
but yeah.
producers too.
Yeah.
I think I said something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you said that, I'm pretty sure I went home and like grinned about it for the next like 4 hours because yeah, that's a huge compliment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the project was they're both video game fans, and there was a song from I think it was the end title song of one of the Final Fantasy games.
Okay.
That it's like a vocal song. It's kind of a soft rock like ballad song.
Yeah.
And he said they really wanted that for that to be her walking down the aisle song. Like they wanted to do something kind of unique and and a little quirky and specific to them.
Right. Yeah.
But they wanted to take it one step further, and they wanted to have like an original arrangement of it. So he actually approached me, and he was like, you know, I'd like to like play guitar on this, like do a recording of me playing the song on guitar, but I need someone to help me like assemble it. Could you do that? And that turned into a really fun project. Like again, you know, this was a case of I went over to his house, I set up equipment in his living room and recorded him playing guitar, and then I took it home and over the next couple weeks sort of played around with fleshing it out. So that's one thing I've been trying to do in terms of collecting instruments and things like that is I like the idea of when someone comes to me with a project and me being able to offer to flesh it out in whatever way I can. So, you know, I took it home and I added, you know, organ, you know, synths, an electric guitar lead and things like that. And then, you know, and then obviously I gave that to them and they did end up using it at their wedding, which,
Sweet.
which, you know, that was a really meaningful project for me to get to work on. And
were you at the wedding?
I wasn't at the wedding. No,
okay.
I actually, I mean, this is the funny thing is I didn't actually know either of them well before this. So it was actually, they had been referred to me by someone else. So I mean, I understand why I wasn't invited to the wedding because I wasn't close friends with either of them, but yeah, it was, you know, that was a really special project for me to get to work on. And I think the fact that I'd done a couple things like that, and then I think I'd also done, well, I'm trying to. There was a piece I did with Jess where I helped her produce a song as a gift for a friend. That might have been technically after I started the company, but like, yeah. But I think, you know, doing sort of more formal and more, more kind of professional caliber jobs like that, I think gave me sort of the last little confidence boost I needed to be like, you know, this is actually something I can market, or this is something I feel confident enough to offer as a service.
Yeah, awesome.
And so you know, at the time I was still working at a part-time job. I was working for actually a company that you used to work for called Musical Minds, which is an elementary after-school piano program. So I was teaching and coordinating for them, and so
we'll have to get Warren to listen to this.
Oh yeah, no, I'll send it to him,
and he'll just criticize it the whole time.
But yeah, so you know, I was still doing that at the time, and so the expectation was Homespun Audio was just going to be kind of a side project, and you know, I didn't. It's really funny because I'm thinking back to when I started it formally, and I didn't actually take that many concrete steps that were different other than, you know, I decided to give it a name, and I, you know, played around with like an online image editor and came up with a logo. I'm not a graphic designer, so that was as elaborate as you can imagine. But and yeah, you know, I put up a Facebook page and an Instagram and things like that.
Right.
But what's interesting is actually the kind of bigger development in that happened fairly recently within the last couple of months, which is so I actually decided you know, speaking of Musical Minds, they're off for the summer because, you know, schools are on summer break, so I'm not teaching for them. I actually made the decision to you know, to resign from that job and decided not to return in the fall, and I had actually been interviewing for another job that I was considering taking and decided to turn that down, and it was ultimately that I'd had a lot of conversations with my wife, who I should also say, you know, my wife Liz is the main reason I've both been able to and felt comfortable doing this. She's been amazingly encouraging. And,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, really inspiring, and just you know, believed in me in a way that actually, you know, made me feel confident enough to pursue something like this. But I was having conversations with her about, you know, taking another job and what I should be doing. And she just kept saying, she was the one who kept saying things like, you know, I really don't think you should be trying to fill your schedule with other things. Like, I think she's like, it's very obvious to me that this is the thing you want to do. Like, you know, this is as close to kind of a dream job as you've ever come across. And she's like, I really think you should just give yourself as much time and energy as you need to make that into what it can be. And, you know, she said, you know, I feel like, that's going to be the difference between this being a career and this being a very expensive hobby.
Sure.
Which was a
great
very
point.
accurate comment. Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's actually been the bigger development was
Okay.
that within the last month or month and a half, I
Yeah.
made the decision to leave the part-time job I was currently doing, and not take on another job and do this full time.
Yeah.
I should also say, since I know this is another topic that's probably going to come up, is balancing art with work and bill paying and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I want to clarify is I'm also in an extremely fortunate position where, my wife also works full time, and in the conventional sense is our household breadwinner.
Yeah.
And so that I'm aware that puts me in kind of a privileged position that a lot of people aren't in, where I do actually have flexibility to to kind of take a risk on a venture that is not necessarily going to be self-sustaining at first, and it's definitely not self-sustaining, right off the bat.
Yeah.
But I mean, one way that ties into what we were talking about earlier is that's actually part of why I feel like it's an important aspect of my kind of mission statement to work with independent artists and to work with people who haven't had the opportunity to produce music before, is that I realize that I'm in a unique position where I'm able to do something that I love in a way that is not necessarily financially profitable at first.
Yeah.
Because I have like the schedule and the financial flexibility to do that. And so I like the idea of taking that opportunity and using it to give back to people.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And, offer people, recording projects at, costs that would be more doable for them than maybe going into a formal studio would, and also giving them schedule flexibility.
Right.
That's another thing that I found can be intimidating about going into a studio is you need to, book a 12-hour day 2 months in advance.
Yeah,
and if you wake up that morning and you're just kind of not feeling it,
Totally.
you either still have to go through and power through it, or you have to pay them the $800 anyway and just like eat the cost. And,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And, one thing I've always tried to tell people when I sign up for projects with them is that, I want the process to be very fluid and I want it to be flexible. And, since I'm in the unusual position of having more schedule flexibility, like I always try to be, accommodating of people. If someone texts me the night before a session and they're like, hey, I've had a really, really rough week. I'm feeling really down. Like I don't kind of feel like my creative juices are flowing.
Yeah. You're like, get in here anyways. Damn
Exactly.
it.
Yeah. And like,
No,
I could do that, or I could, be pushy about it. But I like the idea of being able to say to people, like, no, stay home and rest.
Right,
We'll reschedule when you feel up to it. Cause I want this process to feel comfortable and to be rewarding for you.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful thing to have. And I don't, my view of that is not, I could see, anyone can call that privilege. I see that as you're still taking a risk, regardless of if you do have a little bit of, a little more flexibility there. That's still a pretty big risk that you're just, because and I think that's the hard thing for most people, right? Including myself. Although the thing about me, I'm a teacher, and so I really like my job as a thing, So I, and that's one of the reasons why I do that is because I have the summer off.
Yeah.
And so I get to spend all this free time doing this podcast and also writing music and recording music and releasing music. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that I guess I'm not really viewing that necessarily as a privilege. I view that as still a pretty big risk because you're, because I, of course I don't know your wife, but I would imagine, there's, she sees it, maybe more clearly than you do, because she was the one who's like, you just need to do this. It's obvious to me. And I can, of course, like we only know each other so much, but I could see how that could, you may have, taken that as like, oh, wow. Like, okay.
Yeah. No, it was, I mean, I can very honestly say just like, in a black and white sense, like I wouldn't have decided to do it
if she
hadn't told me that. I still would have known on some level that I wanted to do it, but I think that was really the kind of eye-opening conversation that I needed to. Totally. So I mean, I really owe that to her in that sense, and I mean, I do realize that there's risk involved and that it's not just privilege. I guess the only reason I wanted to say that is that I do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of musicians who maybe have similar aspirations, but if they don't have either a spouse with a full-time job who's supporting them, or like a support network like that, I don't want to just pretend that it's as easy as, telling people, quit your job and do the thing that you love doing. Because I realize that a lot of artists are not lucky enough to be able to do that. And so, I guess, I can acknowledge that I'm taking a risk, but I also want to be cognizant of the fact that I'm, fortunate in a way that a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. No, I see that.
Yeah.
But also let's look at the other side briefly, because this is something that I got into with Jess a little bit, and I didn't get in. I don't want that to sound negative. It wasn't like we were arguing whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that is there is a point where you do kind of have to take a risk. Maybe you don't have to. But one thing that we kind of briefly discussed, and I've also discussed with Peter Cameron, who's also a songwriter, is that plunge, like, is, no, not everyone has to take that plunge and quit their job. You don't have to do that. I know plenty of musicians who have, I would actually say probably more musicians have that story of they were working some kind of shitty job and then they finally got a record deal or got asked to be on a tour or something. That's kind of that's how I kind of think of country music too. Like, Johnny Cash, for example, he was in the military, but when he got out, that's when he was like, I'm going to pursue music, and no one would take him on, right? Like, no labels would sign him. It took Bill Withers, like, he got turned down by like 7 record labels before one of them like took him on. And Bill Withers actually, his job was he installed toilets in airplanes. That's literally literally a shitty job.
Wow.
So anyways,
by the way, if you want to know something about me, I'm going to be sitting here for the next 10 minutes trying to think of another pun for like airplane toilets, because this is the way my brain works, and it's probably going to come out like half an hour from now when we're in the middle of a different conversation.
Yeah, that'll be great. I look forward to that. So you get the point I'm making here. I think, for me, when I kind of had my aha moment was when I finally found a job that I really liked, and then it made life just a bit more. It's still not easy. I'm not going to act like I have an easy life or it's seamless or anything. There's still plenty of obstacles, especially now that I have a child, but it made things a lot more seamless, right?
Yeah.
Because now I enjoy what I do, and then on top of that, I get to enjoy music even more. And so, and with being a teacher, that's that challenge that I actually feel like has increased and upped my ante in creativity, and also just immediately. I just feel like I have more to write about and more to say now because I have kind of this different view, and I view things a bit differently than I did before, when I was kind of stuck in my own point of view, and I'm still, we're all pretty much stuck in our own point of view, but I think it's a little less so now that I have these different responsibilities for other people, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, I think I'm very inspired by the fact that you're taking that leap into this.
Well, thank you.
I think that's wonderful. I didn't know that, and that's super exciting.
Yeah. Well, again, it's that it's actually a fairly recent decision.
Yeah.
So I've had a conversation with Jess about it, but but that happened within the last month or month and a half.
Okay.
So it's
very cool.
Still kind of a new and exciting step on my end.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we could talk about not right here right now, but I've been, as you can see, I've been like kind of slowly working away at making this room sound good.
Oh yeah.
And there are some advantages to the concrete floor, which I didn't know until I kind of started kind of getting some advice from other audio engineers, and they were telling me like, oh no, keep that concrete floor, man. The concrete floor can be great. And so, I've just trying to kind of deaden things for the most part, and I'm content with what I've done, but I would like to do some rearranging. But basically, maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's get into gear stuff.
Oh yeah.
So what? Let's say that. So is primarily what you're doing is, I would imagine, it's like acoustic guitar singer, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So what's your go-to as far as setup for miking a guitar?
So usually in the past, I've actually only recently started experimenting with a couple different setups. Usually my go-to is recording an acoustic guitar with two small condenser microphones
Okay.
in a coincident or near coincident pairing. So XY is usually my go-to just because it's
Are they a matched pair?
Match pair, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I have a couple match pairs of small
Nice.
condenser mics. So I'll kind of swap them out depending on
Yeah.
what I think sounds good. But yeah, I'll usually record an XY or ORTF.
Yeah.
Do people say ORTF or ORTF? It's one of those things I only ever see written down, so I don't actually know how to talk about it. But
I think I don't know. I don't think it matters, but I think
No.
ROTF is probably
I just don't want to sound ignorant.
Yeah.
But so that's I'll usually default to one of those two just because they're they're pretty reliable. It's easy to know what I'm gonna get.
Yeah,
and XY in particular, it makes stereo spread really easily. I don't have to worry about phase problems or anything. But yeah, I especially if the acoustic guitar is going to be either the only or the main instrument in the song, I'll almost always record in stereo just because I love wide sounding recordings.
Do you pan hard? Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that too.
Oh yeah,
because that's like the '70s thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and
it's hard
well,
panning.
and part of it, and this is funny, is that I grew up in like the iPhone iPod generation where I feel like most people day to day like listen to music on earbuds or things like that, and so actually know it's funny, like even though I have at this point invested in like decent headphones and a good headphone amp and monitors and things like that, I still on a day-to-day basis, the vast majority of music I listen to is like on, earbuds while I'm walking around the house. And
me too. Yeah.
So that's how I experience music the most often.
It's more
as a
convenient,
listener.
right?
Yeah, and I've just found when I'm listening to music like that, I love mixes that sound wide and that
completely agree.
Yeah, that make me feel like I'm kind of in the middle of a space rather than something just coming at me from the middle. And so especially if an acoustic guitar is the bedrock of a recording, I want it to sound full and I want it to sound three-dimensional. So my go-to is usually I'll have an XY pair of small condenser mics. I'll usually fiddle with it a little before I start recording to find kind of a good spot. And it's usually, I would say it's usually, let's see, about 1 to 2 feet away from the guitar, depending on how the guitar sounds and what the playing style is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll do that, and I'll usually have I guess kind of the one of the standard mic configurations is pointing sort of the middle of the XY pair at the area where the neck meets the bridge. One of the mics is kind of pointing up the neck and getting kind of the sparkly sound. The other one is pointing a little down below the sound hole to get kind of the bridge, the body of the guitar.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'll usually pan that side, the body side, hard left, so you get kind of the body more in the left ear, and then the sparkly string side more to the right, so you get that in the right ear.
Yeah.
And then in terms, so that's the mic setup. I mean, in terms of preamps and compressors, I'll usually I don't do a ton of EQing on the way in, mostly actually because I'm almost always recording in untreated rooms and things like that, and so it's actually like I don't always feel comfortable making dramatic processing decisions on the way in, just because the room can can kind of be deceptive in that way, and I don't want to cut all the bass end out of an acoustic guitar because it's sounding boomy to me in the headphones, and I then I listen to it when I'm mixing and realize like, oh, I stripped all of the body out of the guitar.
Gotcha.
So I'll maybe do a little bit of EQing, like high pass filtering and things like that on the way in. And maybe a little compression on the acoustic guitar. I'll run it through like a stereo compressor just to even it out a bit. But yeah, when I'm recording, I try to just keep it sounding as natural as possible. Especially since a lot of the people I record are doing sort of more kind of demure, like mellow acoustic folk recording. So there's a lot of finger picking and a lot of really delicate strumming, and I want to make sure I capture that organically.
Yeah. What about, so do you do individual? Do you record guitar first and then do vocals, or do you actually do a performance?
I'll almost always do guitar first and then vocals. If the only times I've done it differently, actually, there's a recent session where someone, a friend of mine named Caitlin, who I've recorded with a bunch of times, and I'm actually working on an EP for her right now. Cool. She came over and we wanted to just do some demos of some of her songs, so not necessarily recordings that would end up on the EP or whatever. Right. So I took that opportunity to play a little bit with doing simultaneous recordings. So I actually had I had a mid-side configuration with 2 large condenser microphones on the guitar, and then I
Okay.
stuck a ribbon mic,
On her vocal?
on her vocal. Yeah, and that I actually liked the way that sounded.
Ooh,
It's something
nice,
I want to
yeah.
play with more often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ribbons are such a unique sound.
Oh yeah, and I mean they sound horrible on some sources, but like on the on the right source in particular, they just sound great. And actually, Caitlin, I told her I really like the ribbon on her voice because she has a very, I mean, I think you've heard her sing. 'Cause you've been to Songwriters Group. Yeah. She has a very warm, kind of like smooth and mellow sounding voice, and so I think the ribbon mics are just they're very kind of soft and like flattering in the high end, and so I feel like someone who has a voice like that, they kind of round it out in a nice way. But yeah, so I'll do that if someone asks me to. But if I'm left to my own devices, I'll almost always record guitar first and then vocals. Part of that is because if I'm recording in an untreated room in a less than pristine environment, having separation just gives you more flexibility when you're mixing. It's also that I really like, particularly on the vocal track, to be able to process it very specifically to the voice, just because everybody's voice is very, very different, and also I guess if I kind of have a signature like aesthetic that I'm developing when I'm mixing songs, it's that I really, really like vocal centric recordings, especially for singer-songwriter recordings where I like the voice to be very, very predominant. Never kind of buried in the arrangement. I like it to feel very like 3-dimensional and full. And dynamic and expressive, and so I guess I like to leave myself as much room with the vocal as possible. And so if the vocal take is like married to a guitar take that's bleeding through from the mic, I just have less flexibility.
I see that. I get that, and sometimes that can be really cool to have sometimes bleed is great.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I completely agree. And that's why I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about what your philosophy was. And I know that's kind of the nice thing is like, it sounds like you don't necessarily have like a set philosophy, like it has to be this way. And I think that's wildly important to not have like a thing where it's like, it has to be this way and you cannot do a performance. I'm sorry, I'm not putting a mic up on your vocal. Like,
and it's one reason one thing that's been great about getting friends to let me record them is just it's given me a chance to experiment with different mic setups and things like that. And I'll usually, because that's one question people ask me is, they'll say, there are a lot of things that you need to decide ahead of time for a session. Like they'll say, do you want me to record to a click? Do you want me to sing and play at the same time? Things like that. And I'll almost always, unless someone specifically doesn't want to make the decision and they just want me to, I'll usually, give them some choice over it, and I'll just try to like explain what the pros and cons are. One funny thing, I discovered this the hard way, was I recorded a solo acoustic album a few years ago, and this was before I started engineering, so I hired someone to produce it for me. And I really wanted that one to sound natural and organic, so all the core performances were, played and sung live at the same time. They were all based around just like a one-take performance. And so I was new to recording, so I didn't know, that much about what you could do in the box afterwards. And so there was one track where, I was sitting down playing guitar and singing at the same time, and I kind of like breathed really heavily in the middle of 2 vocal passages, like sort of, went like... like that. And then I was listening back to the take, and I was like, oh, like, this take sounds really good. Could you maybe just like cut out the part where I breathe? And the engineer was just kind of like, not really, no.
It's a performance.
Or he showed me, he tried cutting it out, and it's like, he's like, the problem is the guitar and the vocals are so close together that if I mute the vocal mic here, the guitar volume suddenly drops a lot.
Exactly.
And so, so things like that I'll always explain to a performer. If I'm recording you singing and playing at the same time, there are certain things that precludes us from doing. Like I can't necessarily get the vocal to sound drastically different from the guitar, and I can't edit as easily and things like that. And none of those are inherently bad.
No.
They're all just like things you need to be aware of.
No, I think that's also another very important thing to be able to tell someone, especially someone who doesn't have that experience. It made me think of 2 things. So one, are you a Fleet Foxes fan at all? I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Are we about to talk about reverb?
Yeah, I mean,
that's the first thing I think of when I think of Fleet Foxes.
Absolutely. They're the first band I ever heard that I was like, oh wow, they literally just took the reverb dial and turned it up. all the way.
Yep.
All the way. It's at 11.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I was like, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that would be a terrible idea, but it works really well for them.
But that's the funny thing is, like, it is a terrible idea sometimes. But you listen to their music, and you can almost. What I think is cool about them is you can almost tell that, like, that's part of their aesthetic. Like, almost to the point where it feels like they kind of like write music with that in mind.
Yeah.
That it's like,
I think you're right.
Harmonies and melodies that sound good when they're kind of cavernous.
I think
and
you're
spacious.
totally right.
Yeah, like it's part of their aesthetic, and it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree. Well, another reason is because I can't remember if it's their first EP or their first record, which those are kind of my two favorite ones. I like the third one too, but anyways, with one of those, you can hear, and I kind of think it's probably the EP, because I know the EP they mainly did themselves, like in their own homes and stuff, and then they got someone to mix it, right? But anyways, you can hear, like, with all that reverb and everything.
Yep.
Da, da, da,
oh yeah.
You know, and I liked it because I was like, oh wow, there's another thing I thought was unprofessional, but I really like hearing it. And another artist that and this is a slight segue, but another thing I learned that I thought was very interesting and inspiring is how I learned how Elliott Smith, because you notice when you listen to his stuff, he doubles everything. Right?
Oh yeah, literally
he doubles
everything.
The guitars, and I was like,
everything's doubled, panned hard left, hard right. Yeah,
and
like
I
his
love
aesthetic.
that sound.
Yeah,
I love it so much. But I don't. But I also realized, like, that shouldn't be my sound. I just really like that he did it. There are some things I think I can get away with doing that, but I don't think that should be like my go-to. But anyways, what I'm getting at is what I've read about that. I want to say actually might have been in Tape Op.
I love Tape Op, by the way.
Tape Op is great. Yeah.
We're not being sponsored by them, but just plug for Tape Op. It's awesome. Read it. Yeah, exactly.
I also am trying to get a sponsor from V8 because I drink V8 a lot. So V8 is. I need to do more plugs. Like when I take the photo, I need more photos.
I was going to say the problem is this is a podcast, so V8 can be listening, and they'll be like, "Well, how do we know you're drinking V8?" Like. Does it have a?
Don't I sound energetic?
Does it have a distinctive like swish sound? It's like shake it in front of the microphone.
Okay, so it doubles everything. But I learned that because I was like, well, how did he do that though? Because you can't. It's very difficult to play a guitar track and then do the same thing again. But apparently, he just was extremely meticulous. Yeah, that's the thing. Is like he just was like, I know exactly how I'm gonna sing this. I'm gonna go needle in the hay and do that exactly that way. Oh yeah,
again. and even like like you said, the little kind of like vocal nuances and swells and everything, they're all 100% on point. Which, I can say from experience is very difficult to do.
Well, John Lennon also does that on his solo records, but he is off a lot of times. Like you'll notice, like he's a little off, which again I like because it's
part of the aesthetic.
It's a nice nuance.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, exactly. Some of those things I like because it makes it feel a little more human. When something's like perfect and polished, it kind of takes a little bit away, and that's another reason why I kind of wanted to get your philosophy on those things because it is kind of hard to know, like, yes, I want this to sound as good as possible, but I also don't want to lose the human aspect of there might be a mistake in there, right?
Oh yeah.
Even though Ryan Adams did some very questionable things recently, I've always been a big fan of his. And one thing when he recorded Jacksonville City Nights, they recorded that all live, one take with the band, and he was like, "If you make a mistake, it's going on the record. Yep, I'm sorry." And he was just like, "That's it," and it's such a great record.
And I've heard Black Sabbath's album was recorded the same way.
I would imagine so. I know Black Sabbath's first album was recorded in a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe, I mean, a listener can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard that they kind of gave themselves the limitation of saying we are just going to do one full run through of every song, and anything that happens on that take is going to happen and it's going to go on the album because that's kind of the attitude we want. Yeah, and I mean that's kind of a good segue into something I like talking about, which is that I think like the number one priority for a producer or for an engineer, the number one priority shouldn't be making everything as conventionally polished as possible. The number one priority should be finding an aesthetic that suits the material and bringing that out.
Yeah,
And I think one thing that's important to remember is that doesn't always mean making things as clean and polished as possible, and sometimes doing that is actually antithetical to the approach.
Yeah.
And did you like how many syllables is that?
That was really good.
5-syllable
I
word.
want to write that down.
Yeah, okay.
So wait, say that again. You said it's not about it being as clean as polished as possible, but it's more about
finding the aesthetic that suits the material. And really trying to bring that out. I mean, one example I love. So one of my favorite singer-songwriters, I don't know if you've ever listened to him, but he records under the name The Tallest Man on Earth.
Yeah.
So I think Christian Matson is the singer's name, but The Tallest Man on Earth is the name of the project. I want to say he's Swedish. I'm not sure,
really?
but he's like a folk singer-songwriter. Most of his albums are just one guitar, vocals or whatever. And I think he's the same way. He records everything in either his home or other people's homes, kind of in like the rural countryside.
Yeah.
But his first couple albums, what I love about them is they sound exactly like what I'm describing, which is they sound like they were recorded just in a house in like the countryside. Like there's one track where it's I think he actually records on tape machines, like old tape machines, so you have like tape hiss and things like that. Well, and also, if he ever gets, above a certain volume, like the S's are clipping like crazy and you're getting kind of tape distortion and things like that. And
and tape just is the perfect compression too.
Oh yeah. Without even needing to run it through anything else. And like there's one track on the album where I think he was recording with the window open and he's just playing a banjo and singing and you can hear birds in the background very, very audibly, like almost as audibly as the vocals. And I think I heard he not only does everything live, like just guitars and vocals, but I think he records everything with one mic, like 2 or 3 feet back. So he, is just getting really like a one shot, everything at once performance. And what I love about it is, from a technical kind of, if you were to nitpick from an engineer standpoint, there are a lot of things that are in a conventional sense messed up about the recordings. Like again, there's a ton of distortion, a ton of clipping. There are moments where maybe the vocal performance doesn't sound polished or whatever. But I just listen to those recordings and I'm like, I can't imagine them being produced another way. And I'm like, I actually think it would be doing this material a disservice to like take it into Ocean Way Studios and record him with like 3 microphones and mix it to kind of, conventional modern day radio standards.
Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to that now.
It's fantastic. They're one of only a handful of albums that like never get old to me. I can listen to them a lot. So his first album is called Shallow Grave, and then the second one is called The Wild Hunt. He has other albums. Those are his first 2, and they're the most kind of stripped down. So that's how I discovered him.
Nice.
But yeah, and I mean a couple of other artists that that I love who have a similar approach are do you know Bon Iver?
Yes.
Yeah. So his first album called For Emma Forever Ago. That's one of the albums I got into around the time I was getting into recording, and I was just completely mesmerized by it. Like for anyone who doesn't know the story, it's the very short version is he went through a ton of hardship in a very short amount of time. I think he broke up with his girlfriend of a long time, and also a band he'd been in for several years broke up, all within the span of like a week or 2. And he got sick with mono, and so he went into a hunting cabin which his dad owned and kind of lived there for a month just to like recover. And during that time he had like a couple microphones and like a Pro Tools rig with him, and he ended up recording this weird kind of quirky offbeat folk album.
I thought he just had a 4-track. I thought it was just like a digital 8-track or something.
I think he did have a laptop. I think he had like an M-Box interface and like a really, really like old, even at that point, old version of Pro Tools. And 2 SM57 microphones. That was it.
I love SM57s.
Oh yeah. There's a reason they're used on everything.
And also that's what Elliott Smith uses on his guitar, or used on his guitars, and that's when I was just like, okay, I guess I don't need the Neumann U87. I don't need. I mean, I would love to have it. I do absolutely love that mic, but I also don't necessarily have $5,000 to just drop on that right now.
Right. And and like I think, I think it's just a matter of assessing what the material needs and what of the tools that you have available, the best approaches to it. Because again, they're like when I say, it's about discovering the aesthetic and applying the right approach to that aesthetic, the flip side of that is there are some artists who, genuinely the best and most flattering way to represent their music is to kind of have it as polished and, produced sounding as possible. Like I'll say this right now, like I'm not, a snob when it comes to, kind of radio pop music or whatever.
Yeah,
There's a lot of kind of conventionally produced pop and rock music that I love, and where I think, like I wouldn't change anything about the way this is recorded. I think it's great, but then I also think it's important for artists to acknowledge that not all music needs to sound like that. And if someone, comes to me and asks me to produce a song or a record for them, and I can tell both by having a conversation with them and also just listening to their music that, that their recording would kind of benefit from more of a rough around the edges kind of handmade, feel, then I won't try to, hide that, or I won't try to gloss over that. I'll, do my best to bring out those elements of the performance because I think that's what's engaging to the listener.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I mean, that just shows your wisdom in what you've learned in a pretty short period of time in producing, really.
I'm glad the takeaway is that I'm really wise. That's
well, I didn't say you.
This is why I wanted to come.
It shows your wisdom. It shows you have some wisdom.
I've learned to repeat mantras.
Yeah,
basically.
Okay,
yeah.
That's good. My favorite recording story, because you said I can't remember what word you used. I think you said the grittiness of recording or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So that whenever I think of grittiness of recording, I think of Tom Waits.
Oh yeah, I love Tom Waits.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
me too.
We can talk about this. Yeah.
So this is the funniest thing I've ever heard about recording. So he was asked, and this is I got this information secondhand. So he was asked on one song, like, what that song? Did you cut that straight to vinyl? Because there's that pop.
Yeah.
It sounds just like vinyl, the popping in there. And he was like, "Oh no! I was outside cooking chicken, and the chicken was popping in the grill, and I just put a mic on it." And so he said, and I actually believe him. Like, I think 100%. He's weird enough to be like, put a mic on this chicken right now, because it's going to sound like, and someone's going to think it sounds like vinyl.
See, if you want to know how much of a nerd I am, I hear that and I'm like, that doesn't even sound weird to me. I'm like, I would do that too.
Yeah.
Or like, actually, I mean, I was following, he's not an artist who's even known for being weird, but Adam Young, the guy behind Owl City, he's the one who did that song Fireflies. It's like, I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turned.
I think I know that, yeah.
It was on the radio a while ago.
Okay.
You just got a sample of my morning singing voice.
That was good. That's good.
But yeah, he like does a lot of electronic music, and so I think he does a lot of like sampled sounds. And I just followed him on Instagram, and his Instagram feed's actually hilarious because he has pictures of him like sticking a condenser mic under a trampoline so he can record like the trampoline springs.
Yeah.
Or he has a vocal booth, like a room like this one that's like really treated, and he has like a U47 set up, except instead of a vocalist, there's an upside down bicycle, and he's recording the bicycle spokes going around. So yeah, I mean, I feel like producers especially do this all the time, and like most people don't even like people wouldn't even know that about Tom Waits if they hadn't asked him. But no, he's one of my favorite artists of all time. I think he's one of the most original artists I've ever heard.
I agree.
He's easily by a mile one of the best lyricists I've ever heard. Because I am a songwriter as well in addition to producing music, and I just he's one of the few songwriters who, even when I don't love a song of his, he's consistently original.
Yeah, no, I completely
that's something
agree.
I have a ton of respect for. My other favorite recording story of his is and this is kind of a funny example about like producers communicating with artists, because there's often sort of a technological language barrier between musicians and producers where they won't necessarily have the vocabulary to communicate to an engineer what they're looking for. Like, I need you to do a high pass filter here, and I need you to compress less.
Right.
Things like that. So one thing a lot of producers say is they kind of have to get used to speaking artistese when it comes to music critiques. And this one producer, someone asked him, like, what's the best, bit of feedback or best critique you've ever gotten from an artist? And he was, I don't remember the exact wording, but he said it was when he was recording with Tom Waits. And I think there was a track where like they had recorded the backing track and they were overdubbing a guitar solo, and the guitar solo wasn't sitting well with the mix. Like it kind of felt off and like jarring. Yeah. And, the producer was like, this is where a lot of guitarists would have been like, I think you need to, blend the guitar in a little better and pan it differently. Right. He said what Tom Waits did is he came into the recording and he was like, see, what I feel is, I can't even mimic Tom Waits' voice, but he was like, I feel like, we're all on a road trip and the band is all in the backseat of the car. They're all chilling. They're laughing, having a good time.
Yeah,
And then you're sticking the guitarist up on the windshield. And
Uh-huh.
so it's like he's technically moving with us, but he doesn't feel like he's part of the group. And the producer was like, oddly enough, that they were like, I actually completely understand what you mean. Cool. We'll fix that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
no, I agree with the originality, and he's just hilarious too. Is the thing
he's amazing.
He's kind of everything. There's PJ Harvey is another one to me that always recreates herself. Like she's always original to me, and also a really good lyricist and just super unique voice. Yeah, So that's there's. The unconventional, but I think you can only be unconventional when you kind of learn how to do the rules first, right? I mean, that's one thing I
mean,
find.
it's the cliche about you needed to know the rules in order to know how to break them.
Well, and I completely believe in that, though.
Yeah.
I really do. And that's, as a teacher, that's one thing I do feel like it's important to me to teach. Like, we're learning the rules, okay? It may not be that much fun, but it'll be a little more fun. You can be more creative when you learn to actually break these things, right? Because, you teach all those rules. Like, I'm going to show you how to use a colon, all right? But you may never want to use a colon in your life. So there's just some of those things like that. So as far as managing your time, so as of right now, is it kind of like, what kind of things are you doing? Like what, maybe we could talk about like pre-production. Like what do you do to prepare for, let's say someone's booked a recording tomorrow. What are the types of things you kind of do to prep for that? Do you do pre-production and I mean, obviously you do post, you usually mix it yourself,
I do,
right?
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have to talk about post-production, but maybe pre-production. Because I've always thought pre-production is very important.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll actually admit it's a process that I'm still kind of fine tuning the best way to approach it. But I mean, usually for pre-production, I'll if it's a subsequent time I'm recording with someone, like if I'm ever recording with Jess or Caitlin, because I've worked with them often enough, I usually kind of know what they're going to come in and want to do, so I don't necessarily need to talk with them about it. But if it's someone I've never recorded with, and I actually have a session on Saturday with someone I've never recorded with, so I'm going to meet up with him tomorrow to kind of make a game plan for that. But
great.
But yeah, if I'm doing that, I mean, I'll usually, if they have a demo of the song they want to record, I'll, usually have them send it to me just even so I can hear it and have a general sense of, the style of music, things like that.
Yep.
Also once I have a sense of the style of music, like whether the playing style is really loud and brash or whether it's quiet, what the tenor of their voice is, I can usually make an educated guess about, what kinds of microphones I want to do or things like that. Sure. And so, I'll always, if someone's coming over to record at my house, I'll always try to have stuff set up before they get there. I obviously can't do that if I'm recording at their house. I just have to kind of be as quick as possible. But if they're coming over to my house, I'll have, equipment set up. Again, I don't have a treated room, but I have a collection of, I think they're called Producer's Choice acoustic blankets, which I actually, my sort of strategy for like setting and tearing stuff up down. Wow, I can't talk. Setting stuff up and tearing it down really quickly. There we go. Second time's the charm. Is I'll hang those over like boom mic stands in a T shape. So I'll put up kind of overhead level stands so they're like 6.5 feet up, and then drape the blankets over them and kind of use those to make portable gobos. So I'll set those up in the basement and actually go some distance toward deadening the sound. I'll lay down a rug and then I'll try to get any rack equipment I'm using wired up, get mics hooked up. If I have any tube equipment that needs to warm up, I'll turn it on about an hour before the person shows up.
Nice.
But yeah, that's, that's usually all I end up needing to do. I mean, pre-production, it's just by definition a little less involved when it's like a very simple session, like a guitarist and a vocalist or a pianist and a vocalist. If you're recording with a full band that has a drummer and multiple instruments and things like that, there's probably more kind of pre-planning you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for a singer-songwriter, it's usually just getting any logistical questions out of the way, what instrument, or instruments are you going to play? Are you going to want to play and sing at the same time? Because, obviously if that's the case, that'll affect what microphones I choose and how I configure them.
Totally.
Also, I mean, even, again, one of the side effects of recording from home and kind of advertising that I have a more flexible schedule is I'll often have recording sessions that are pretty quick where, a lot of the people I work with have day jobs or, teach lessons or things like that. And so oftentimes it's a matter of, I'm only free from 10 a.m. until 11:30.
Okay. Wow.
And so, which, by kind of typical studio metrics, that's a really, really quick session. But if I know that ahead of time, then I can kind of plan. I can say, okay, I'll make sure, I'll get up at, 8 or something and make sure I have everything set up so that we don't waste any time when you walk in the door.
Right.
And then I can kind of be looking at the watch and monitoring, okay, we have a decent number of takes of the piano and we only have 45 minutes left. Let's, call the piano good and move on to vocals to make sure we can get it before you have to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be that time frame would be a bit stressful, but I think see how you can manage it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's never ideal, and it's usually we'll only do that if it's if that's just one piece of something that someone's going to come back and work. If we had to from beginning to end do a full song in an hour and a half, I would usually advise waiting until we have more time to do it. So in this case, it's a couple of people I work with in particular just have very, very busy schedules and don't tend to have, a 12-hour chunk. Don't tend to ever have a 12-hour chunk of time free. So to that end, I tell them, if you're ever able to come just for an hour or two, I'm always happy to work with you in that. And we just do as much as we can in that time period.
Yeah. Well, and I also see, sometimes there is an advantage to that. I will have... I'll have time, especially with having a child now, and I'm trying to... I mean, I'm going to be putting out 2 EPs this year with 2 different bands, right? 2 different acts. And
are they both your bands, or are you kind of a collaborator on any of them?
Yeah. So Water Penny is a thing that I started with Lane and Amy, and we started it.
And that's the one that's kind of more like rootsy, folksy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, like Americana. Yeah. I call it alt Americana.
Okay.
I think it's alternative Americana.
Yeah.
That's what So at least right now, I don't. Maybe it'll branch out. But anyways, so with that, it's we all kind of write the songs together for the most part. I mean, of course, there's always the case when someone kind of did some more writing, or maybe one was written before or whatnot. But anyways, that, and then with I also Aline Vita and I have started a project just called Aline and Wes, and we have written all the songs together.
Oh, nice.
I'm Aline she's a pianist and a guitar player, but she's kind of relinquished the music to me.
Okay.
Well, although she did write a guitar part for one of the songs, which was cool.
But is she mostly a vocalist in this particular project?
She's wanted to focus on the vocals, which I think is a good idea, and she's a fantastic vocalist. Anyways, what I'm getting at is I'm trying, so I have these little windows. That's why I got up early this morning. That's why I want to do this here. Because usually she our daughter sleeps until about 10. So I this morning I actually woke up and tried to knock out this guitar part, and I don't know, I just wasn't getting it. But there are those times when I just have an hour or even less where I'll nail it too, because I know this is the only chance I have. My life, I just kind of think of it as my life's on the line. I gotta nail this, or I don't have any other time to do it. So but there's so many that's why I wanted to talk about philosophies, because I've changed mine a bit, because I used to be more of the tallest man on earth approach. It's and I definitely 100% do think that you have to have a good song. And I think if you have a good song, then I think the recording doesn't matter as much. I think there are times when you have a fantastic recording and you have a decent song, but yet that song could still be a hit. Right. I think there are those, but I think and that's why I want to listen to his stuff, because that excites me, because I know he's been compared to Bob Dylan, which Bob Dylan was that way. Bob Dylan would refuse to do, early on at least, he refused to do 2 takes, because he was like, no, that's it. I nailed it.
Well, what cracks me up about that is there are literally mistakes on his albums.
Oh yeah, exactly.
There are takes on his albums where he audibly forgets a lyric and then stumbles over it, and the engineer's like, okay, great, let's do that over, and he's like, no, put that on, on the record. Exactly. Which is the most Bob Dylan thing imaginable.
Exactly. So I learned that exactly what you just said, and I thought that's exciting. I want to do that. And there is some stuff that if you really were nitpicky with it, you would hear the mistakes. But also it could also make it very endearing, right? But anyways, what I'm getting at, then I learned about Brian Wilson's approach when he made Pet Sounds.
Oh, yeah.
They did like 400 takes of stuff, right? That's absolutely ridiculous and absurd, but his philosophy is that I have to live with this the rest of my life. And I want it to be as perfect as possible.
Yeah,
and
I love Brian Wilson,
exactly.
too, by the way. He's another one of my favorite artists.
I just love that philosophy.
Yeah.
At first, it bothered me because I was like, man, it's never going to be perfect. You know, it shouldn't be. But I do now, I think that I'm a bit older and hopefully a little more mature. I think now I'm getting it. Yeah, you have to live with it the rest of your life. So you should...
Well, and I mean, the humbling and kind of morbid fact is, like, it will, like, the music may outlive you. Like, that's...
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's one thing Steve Albini actually talks about in interviews a lot, is that, he's like, I'm not naive enough to think that a lot of the recordings I work on are going to become popular immediately.
Sure,
and in some cases, they may not become popular while the artist is alive. But he's like, what the beautiful thing about recordings, and this is kind of something I still get kind of sentimental about, is like the beauty of recordings is that you can essentially communicate with people who are either not able to communicate with you directly just because, they're in a different part of the world or, different like circle, or because they're literally not here on Earth anymore.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I actually meant to talk about earlier. Like one of the things I love the most about recording, and one of the reasons I love the idea of it being a gift that I can give to other artists, is I feel like I still have a little kid from the 90s, like, sort of excitement about the idea of having a recording. Because I remember, when I was growing up, like, if you were a band or an artist and you had a CD or a tape, like, that was a big deal. Like, that basically, as far as I was concerned, that meant you were legit. It's like, you have your music on a CD. That clearly means you're popular and you're famous and, like, you're a rock star. And, obviously that wasn't always the case then, but it was true that it was like a lot more logistically difficult to get an album made at that time.
Right.
It has since become much, much, much easier for, almost anyone with a computer to some extent can put music up online and even can order CDs. And so that's not necessarily a conventional marker of success in the same way, but I feel like in a weird way, I still have that kind of like magical attitude toward it, of just like there's something mystical and like really kind of butterflies in the stomach exciting to me about having a recording of your music. And so it's something I even vicariously still get excited about when I'm recording other people, and the notion that I'm able to help kind of give that to someone else, especially someone who's never heard a good recording of their music before, that's just the most rewarding thing in the world to me.
Yeah, that's super exciting.
Yeah,
and I agree. Music is the universal language. It also is timeless. So
I mean, hell, we were talking about Johnny Cash. Like Johnny Cash's like 50s recordings they're going to be, 70 years old or something coming up, right? I can't do math, but people still listen to them, and they don't sound like they're 70 years old.
No,
they don't sound any less relevant. That's
exactly.
astonishing when you think about it that way.
Yeah, there's some of that stuff. What's so interesting about that as well is that you listen to some stuff from the 50s sometimes and you're like, how does this sound so good?
Oh yeah.
Like, what were they doing so well? Because it's probably more of that we want in 2019 to sound like that, because we like that throwback sound.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's so unique. And now we've gotten this audio quality so pristine and so clean
that it almost sounds alien to us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love it cracks me up listening to interviews with older engineers who they'll just be chuckling about the fact that they're like, I go into studios with like young engineers and I see all these plugins, that emulate like tape saturation or crossfade or not crossfade, crosstalk. And like tube saturation and wow and flutter, and they're like all these things that, like, if in the 60s I had the option to eliminate all of those things, I would have. And so they're like, it kind of boggles my mind that people are like, you know what this recording needs a little more of? Like a shitty sounding tape machine.
A little more noise. Let's get a little noise
a tape
on
machine
this.
that was not set up properly.
No, it's the opposite of that, or maybe not the opposite, but another example is like photos that people put grain on. There's like grain applications or something, or a filter you put grain on. It's like that's what photographers were trying to avoid.
Yeah. Oh, they hated it. And it's like it still feels a little weird to me when I see feature films that were shot on HD, because like I'm used to like movies from like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that were shot on film, and they sort of have that kind of artful, I don't even know the film term, but the kind of like smearing of the colors and things like that, where it's not so sharp and it looks a little like stylized. Yeah, it's to the point where when I see a higher fidelity image, it's almost like, this is weird.
I know.
Like,
yeah, I agree. I don't
tone it down for me.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. I don't typically like it. Yeah, and with the increase, it's maybe we could brief on these things, but like with that, now we're like at 8K. You can shoot video at 8K. And I'm just like, how high is this going to go? Because with recording, of course, we have the option now to do 2496, right?
Yep.
But what I've noticed and what I've talked, I'm curious what you use, because when I've talked to other engineers about that, they're like, yes, I have done 2496, but number one, can barely hear the difference.
Yeah.
Number two, it takes up so much more space. Yep. So what do you record at? What do you?
So it's funny. I don't actually have a set preference.
Okay.
I will say usually I default to 48.
Okay.
And that's literally only because I think the handful of sessions I did in the studio most recently before I stared recording on my own, the engineers did that. And
right.
it's a little bit of a, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me thing.
Totally. I agree.
I will occasionally do sessions at 96, just again, literally just because I can, and even almost to see if there's an audible difference.
Exactly. I've done the same thing, and I can't personally hear it. I think
I can't personally
sometimes
tell
it might be
either.
like a placebo, like I make myself believe, like, this is higher quality.
Right.
But from and even from 44.1 to 48, I can barely hear the difference. And I know like I don't think iTunes even allows you to do 24 48.
No, and anything you ever listen to on a CD is obviously 44.1.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's like CD standard.
Which that's another funny thing is like we grew up with CDs being the best quality, and now like my kid, for example, is gonna think of a CD as like a vinyl record. Like, what is this shit?
Well, I know engineers always laugh about they're like, I'm picturing like student engineers 30 years from now being like, man, I want that like, that analog warmth of like compact discs. And like, can we run my digital files through a compact disc to give them a little of that like analog texture?
You're totally right. You're
or,
absolutely right.
Or like one person was like, I can't wait to walk into a recording studio in 40 years and see like iPods lying around for them to be like, man. we have these as bit crushers.
Yeah,
like,
I know. That kind of bothers me.
Yeah.
But you're probably exactly
true,
right.
though.
You're probably exactly right. All right, cool. Well, I think this might be a good place to wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah. But thanks so much for doing this. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you. This was a blast. Yeah.
Cool.
I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, check out Homespun Audio. Just homespunaudio.com.
The website is actually still under construction.
Okay.
So if you go to homespunaudio.com, you'll just get a GoDaddy page or something. But yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Homespun Audio, and Gmail, homespunaudio@gmail.com.
Okay.
So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. All right.
Thank you.
I don't care that you don't care.